Why does the United States, the world's richest superpower, always have money for war but no money to treat its people? We are talking about a country with a defense budget of $886 billion in 2024, a number too big to imagine. Meanwhile, millions of Americans still do not have enough money to pay hospital bills, pay tuition, or survive a cold winter. The question is raised in the context of the unpredictable conflict between Iran and Israel, with Iran even threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil is transported. Immediately, the US Congress began discussing increasing defense spending. Every year, the US Congress passes the federal budget, dividing it among the departments: defense, health, education, infrastructure, etc. But what comes first? Not education, not health, not housing, but it is always defense. And many people ask, where does the money to support the war come from? The answer is obvious. It is from the federal budget, where the mandatory policies are implemented. From the health budget, where millions of Americans are relying on Medicaid, or from the $1.7 trillion in unwritten student loans that are making the burden on the younger generation even greater, or from public classrooms where students have to study in conditions lacking computers and air conditioning. This priority always makes Americans angry. Quote, "Why don't we have health insurance but the government has money for bombs?" Unquote. Welcome back to Economy Roadshow. Let's not keep you waiting. It's time to dive in and find the answer to the question, why does America always have money for bombs? Who really has to pay the cost of war? Brace yourself, because the numbers coming up will blow your mind.
US officials always say defense spending is to protect peace, stability, and democratic freedoms around the world. It sounds noble. But look closely today. Nearly 750 US military bases around the world, presence in more than 80 countries. The wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria have all involved the United States. And recently, the role of sponsoring weapons in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Many analysts around the world are skeptical, and perhaps even the American people are asking the question, is this still defense, or is it a form of helping the US expand its power and interests in globalization? Look at the numbers. In 2025, the US Congress officially approved a defense budget of $886 billion, up nearly 4% from 2024, even without a full-scale war underway. In the broader picture, this is not so surprising. Since September 11th in 2001, the US has spent more than $8 trillion on military operations in the Middle East, according to a report by the Costs of War Project at Brown University. If you break it down, the US spends more than $1 million every minute on defense, a figure that is both staggering and thought-provoking. But it's not just the numbers that matter. While defense spending continues to grow with quick legislative approval, civil service areas like public health, public education, and infrastructure face chronic budget shortfalls. For example, in 2023, more than 1.6 million Americans were dropped from Medicaid, the vast majority of them children and seniors. At the same time, public education systems in many states continue to struggle with crumbling infrastructure and a lack of basic resources. Meanwhile, student debt nationwide has surpassed $1.7 trillion. But debt relief programs have stalled. The big question here is, it's not so much a question of should America spend on defense? It's, given limited resources, where do the government's priorities lie? The budget in and of itself is a policy statement, and if hundreds of billions of dollars can be spent quickly on national security and defense goals, then is delaying support for people, for hospitals, for education, undermining society's trust in the very system they help build. Because in any country, security and people's livelihood should not be two conflicting goals, but two parallel pillars. One of the most striking examples of shifting public budget priorities in the post-pandemic United States is Medicaid, the healthcare system for low-income people. According to data from the Kaiser Family Foundation, KFF, by the end of 2023, at least 14 states had cut Medicaid support or limited access. As a result, more than 1.6 million Americans were excluded from the program, many of them children and seniors, the most medically vulnerable populations. At the same time, according to KFF's 2025 update, more than 27 million Americans still live without health insurance, a figure that clearly shows the gap between the nation's fiscal capacity and the reality of people's access to essential services. The problem is not a lack of money, it's the allocation of resources. Health budgets are tight. Meanwhile, major defense spending, including billion-dollar aircraft carrier construction, is approved quickly and with little debate. This situation raises an important strategic question. In a volatile global economy, is U.S. public policy accurately reflecting society's most pressing needs? From a socioeconomic perspective, the national budget is a commitment to priorities. And when urgent public health spending is deferred in favor of long-term security investments, it is not just a fiscal choice, but one with profound moral and social implications. As of the first quarter of 2025, total student loan debt in the United States, student debt has exceeded $1.76 trillion. According to data from the Federal Reserve, a figure higher than Canada's total GDP over the same period. There are currently about 43 million Americans paying off student loans, with an average debt of $41,000 per person. According to the latest statistics from the U.S. Department of Education, March 2025. Notably, this burden is not only on recent graduates, but also ranges from young people to those who have entered middle age. The burden of debt directly affects the ability of the younger generation of Americans to save, buy a home, invest long-term, and start a family. On a macro level, it creates a spiral of low consumption, low income, low growth among the most important population group for the future of the economy. The Biden administration has pledged to cancel $10,000 of student debt per person, a policy that was expected to be a game changer for educational equity. But the path to implementation has been fraught with legal hurdles. Most recently, the Supreme Court in May 2025 rejected an effort to expand the debt forgiveness package, leaving millions of people saddled with long-term loans. Meanwhile, defense spending, such as a Tomahawk missile worth about $2 million, is still being approved regularly. To put that in perspective, that's enough money to cover 4 years of tuition for nearly 50 students at public universities, like the University of Michigan.
I'm only $38,000 in debt. Definitely the $20,000 could have definitely helped me.
I still have loans, and I'm paying interest rates on them.
I'm a person that paid off her student debts and worked really hard, and I worked 3 jobs at a time, and I paid them all off ahead of time.
It's annoying pressure. And you can work with them, hey, I can't pay this month. But to be honest, it's pressure that you can't ignore. Because every time you're paying a bill, like, let me make sure my school loans are paid.
It would be unfair, it's not like I had a lot of money. I actually worked hard to pay it off.
You know what most people say? I'm never gonna be able to pay that. And imagine if, what's scary? Imagine you went and got your master's. Imagine you got your PhD, So then you owe $180,000, you had a PhD and you can't pay your loans back.
There's other people that struggle to pay it off because they didn't want to be in debt. I hate debt.
It's always something with the government. It's always like a false hope that we're having. And I think that the politicians should just do better and be for the people as they say they are.
We're from Canada, so we don't pay as much for tuition. I can't imagine what it would be like living here and having to pay that much. Like, I just finished my undergrad and I have zero debt, so I'm really happy about that. And I can't imagine what it would feel like for people to like actually have to pay all of that money. And I think, especially being like in your early 20s, it's so hard to just get by.
According to a report from the U.S. Department of Education, the federal budget for education will be cut by 8% in 2024. This cut directly affects public schools in at least 38 states, especially low-income areas. The obvious consequences: many schools are facing a serious shortage of teachers, with a ratio of 1 teacher for every 20 students in many localities. Deteriorating facilities are also a big problem. At Jefferson Elementary School in Detroit, students have to learn in classrooms with constantly flashing lights, and broken windows have not been replaced all winter, according to local media. Meanwhile, according to Defense News, the U.S. Department of Defense in 2025 approved a plan to build 3 new military bases in Saudi Arabia with a total estimated cost of up to billions of dollars to expand its strategic presence in the Middle East. For comparison, a new base can cost $500 million, while it only takes about $2 million to completely renovate an elementary school like Jefferson. In a challenging economic climate, the government is willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to maintain a military presence 12,000 kilometers away, but lacks the resources to improve learning conditions for students at home. Will this story continue when the U.S. Congress agrees to spend $886 billion on defense by 2025, an amount more than 500 times greater than the social welfare budget of just $1.5 billion? According to the U.S. Census Bureau, this reflects a serious imbalance in American society. Think of the Lopez family in California. They lost their home because they couldn't repay a $400,000 loan. Meanwhile, the government approved spending $2 million on a single Tomahawk missile. Or take Mia, a 10-year-old girl in Detroit studying in a classroom without computers while the Pentagon builds new military bases in Saudi Arabia. This isn't just a financial issue. It's a sign that people are being forgotten, because a national budget is not just numbers. It is a mirror of a country's values. And if America continues pouring trillions of dollars into war, while families lose their homes, their healthcare, and access to education, then what we're facing isn't just a budgeting problem, it's a crisis of confidence. No one denies that defense spending is necessary, especially for a country like the United States, which is a global power with many international security responsibilities. But the core issue is not whether to spend, but how much and how it is balanced within the overall national budget. Because when people see hundreds of billions of dollars being allocated to unlikely war scenarios, while public health, public education, and housing, things that directly affect daily life, are cut or delayed, what worries them is not just the size of the budget, but the policy priorities that have drifted away from their lives.